Guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. If you guys are tuning in, please make sure that you guys like the video, comment, and subscribe. Today I have a guest that I feel like is going to share a lot of knowledge with us. He's been in the wealth management world to where I feel like as an individual, I've always needed help to some guidance to how to manage my money. We don't ever really learn that when we're younger. I come from a family that has no financial literacy, you can say. So maybe I'm just trying to help you guys avoid some mistakes and hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll let the guest introduce himself, and so make sure you guys comment. Sal, how are you, man?
Good, Mario. Thanks for having me, man.
No, thank you for coming. How's your day been?
It's been busy. Been hopping around meeting to meeting. I've had, client meetings left and right.
Okay.
It's just a packed schedule, always packed schedule, but that's how we operate. So.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the Charlotte area for about 5 years now since I graduated. And I was even down in Rock Hill, South Carolina, 4 years before that because I played college soccer there. Originally, I'm from Orlando, Florida. So I grew up there up until the age of about 14, 15, give or take. And I played soccer the whole time, right? Mm. So I got a nice little scholarship. I then went to boarding school in Minnesota for 2 years. So 16 years old, 17 years old, and 18 years old, basically.
What is boarding school like?
Oh, man, it's wild. It's the one I was at, it was pretty type A. Pretty military style, so to speak, but it was a whole bunch of young kids. It was a hockey school, a soccer school, golf school, figure skating school. Wow. And it was like 400 kids, like top of their game, basically all growing up together is what it was like.
How'd you get, or why did you go to boarding school? Is it something that your parents put on you, or is it something you were so good at a sport that you got the opportunity to go there? Yeah,
so I had a good opportunity with soccer, right? Okay. So give you a little bit more background. In Orlando, I come from an area that's like not necessarily the best, so to speak. So soccer was always like a way for me to, go explore other avenues, go explore other places and, travel to games, travel to other places. And hopefully the goal at that time was to go play professionally and go get a scholarship to, get an education, things like that. Well, one of these times I was playing against one of these teams from Maryland or New York or something. It was a northern team is what I remember. Okay. And they had come down to Orlando to Disney to play in something called Disney Showcase that happens every year, even to this day. Even all these years later, it still happens in December every single year. And what happened was the scout was actually looking at a player from the other team, right? So they didn't come to watch me. They were coming to watch a player on the other team. But that game, I happened to play like really, really strong. And the guy reached out to my coach, who I guess they had like a mutual connection or something, and found my information and kind of approached me about this. So, hey, have you ever been to Minnesota? Have you ever seen snow before? And me being a kid from Orlando growing up, I'm like, nah, I don't, snow. I've seen it in the movies like Home Alone and things like that, but I've never gone and experienced it myself.
All your life, then you were just like hot weather, tropical weather,
beach. I'm Southern Florida. West Palm Beach. I was born in West Palm Beach, even though I grew up in Orlando. So I'm used to like the beach and the sun and the palm trees and all this different stuff like that. Well, the guy, my first time seeing snow was when I went up there for a visit. And it was freezing, man. It was cold.
How was that experience? Were you just like in shock of what it was?
So this is what happened, right? So at first I was like, oh, snow, it's so much fun. Like, how do you guys get tired of this? Like, I'm the Florida boy, like making the snowballs, making the snowmen, like throwing it at people's faces. And then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, it's like the wind chill hits. So it's like 30 degrees, but the wind is making it like -10 or -5 degrees. So in my eyes, I'm like, oh, this isn't fun anymore. Like, this isn't a good time anymore. Take me back to the beach. Take me back to the palm trees, It
was like a realization, like, I made a mistake.
It was a shock. And then immediately I'm like, this is how you guys get tired of it. This is why you guys aren't as excited as I am about the snow. And then, that's how it was the next 2 years. So
like, you didn't pursue your career further. From what I understand, did a few things back you up. Obviously, it's really competitive, so that I'd understand.
Yeah, so it's really competitive. I'm very, very blessed that I was able to get a scholarship to go play, even at a small D1 school here in Rock Hill, South Carolina, called Winthrop University.
Okay.
But I also had a little spell in Germany, right? So because I went to boarding school, I took a lot of like college classes. And after my first college season, fall 2014, I went to Germany for about 9 months, and tried to pursue a career out there. And I had a really good spell there, but they wouldn't renew the visa. Right? So that was kind of the issue. And, I don't know if I should be saying this, but, they kind of pay under the table type of thing because I didn't want to lose my college eligibility, all these different things like that. But it was a great experience. I played in Dusseldorf, which is a city on the northern side, west northern or east northern, I can't remember. But I played there, and then I also played at a club in the 4th league. Which in German it's Regionalliga is called, and it's called Schwarzwald Essen. So SW and then ESSIEN. Schwarzwald Essen it was called, and it was a cultural shock. It was a great time to kind of really learn about myself, right? Like really push the boundaries of like what I thought I could do, right? Because I was the kid that went to boarding school, then went to college, and then now I'm in a completely different country with a completely different type of people. Right, the Germans, they can be, a little bit more harsh sometimes, or come off a little bit more harsh. We're Latin, right? We're very huggy, we're touchy, we're feely, we're laughy. Where sometimes in that German culture, it's a little bit more, blank face type of thing.
Oh man.
Yeah, so it was a wake up call for sure.
So I mean, from what I hear is that you really had like an interesting soccer career, and I feel like you had fun with it. So obviously you're not a pro right now. Yeah. So that didn't fare out. Did that experience influence what you are now, or where you wanted did you think about this option being a doing wealth management through that experience, or when did that start?
Yeah. So when I saw they weren't going to renew my visa, right? When I couldn't get my visa renewed, I came back and I finished my soccer career here at Winthrop University. So I did the sophomore year, junior year, so on and so forth. And I continued to play. After my sophomore year, had a great 2015, won conference championship, went on to play in the NCAA tournament. Even during my summers, I went and played down in IMG Academy for Bradenton, which is in Bradenton, Florida. And I ended up getting injuries in my left knee, right? So it was meniscus, LCL, PCL, MCL, and that was the first time, right? So then I did the rehab, was out for about 5 or 6 months, then came back for preseason my junior year. 2 weeks later, injured again. Everything just tore.
Wow.
So rather than repairing everything, they kind of like took out my meniscus, all these different things just to speed up the healing process because I was in season. But at that time, it was mentally very, very tough. Physically very, very tough, even just because I was a very shifty player, right? A lot of cuts, a lot of hard pivots here and there, which after the surgeries, I wasn't the same. I mean, I'm very transparent about that. I was not the same type of player.
Wow.
But I learned a lot, right? Resilience, like push through, no excuses, like get it done. However you have to get it done type of thing. And that's something I took from that experience. But, to go back to your original question, being a wealth manager really wasn't on my radar. Being a financial planner wasn't really on my radar until my junior year, sophomore, second semester. Once all these injuries happened, I'm like, oh, well, shit, now it might be time to...
You started rethinking your life and your options.
100%, man. It was, I needed to wake up to reality a little bit and say, hey, the trajectory I was on looks a little bit different now, in a different direction of life.
How did that impact you to where you were like, okay, I've had a successful soccer career and I've thought about it up until this point?
Yeah. It was rough, to be honest. I had a pretty, what I would say dark period for myself, I was drinking a little bit too much than that, everyone parties in college, but I was drinking a little bit more than I should have. I was pushing myself physically and mentally more than I should have for the ball. I was, rather than kind of saying, hey, listen to your body, give yourself the time to rest. In my mind, I was like, no, I have to make up for the lost time. No, I have to be back by a certain date so I can play in this season or I can play out this game. right? And I think that did a lot of like mental damage to me in terms of not taking care of my body and prioritizing my body the way I should have. And that was a tough time for me. But on the other side, right, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did I end up in this position because that happened, or did that happen which made me end up in this position, type of thing? It really forced me to look at other options, like, hey, where's my real skill set if soccer is no longer there? What traits carried me in soccer that I can transcribe to other aspects of life or other aspects of business, right? And that really forced my hand there.
And so what did career shift did you do during that year?
So my advisor was part of the financial planning program at Winthrop, right? It was one of their first years. He was a financial planner himself. Great guy, Dr. Gibson, one of my favorite professors of all time. To this day, I still talk to him. And he was like, hey, you're good with numbers. You have a good way of talking to people and, getting your thoughts across, and you're very charismatic. And he said, why don't you take this entry-level finance course, because you need a math or like math credit of some sort anyways. Why don't you just take this class? I teach it, and we'll see where it goes. So I took it, and he's like, you need another credit. Why don't you just take the next class either? Well, next thing I know, I get hustled, and I'm halfway through the financial planning degree anyways. And he's like, hey, you're good at this. I think you can make it work.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I'm halfway there anyways. I might as well just keep going. I might as well just finish it out. And I did. And it was one of the best decisions I've made.
So then that turned you into, do you get certified? Do you get accredited? What do you have to go through?
Yeah. So what I would call the gold standard, right? The end all be all for financial planners is something called the CFP. That stands for Certified Financial Planner. And you have to pass this pretty rigorous exam. And you have to get 3 years of work experience in the financial industry, or 2 years of kind of what I would call apprenticeship under a financial advisor, right? One of those two.
And where did you find that to gain that experience? Because, I mean, just like any other job, they're not just going to hire you because you know nothing, right? So, like, how did you go into a program like that would give you those credits?
Yeah, good question. So when I was going through the program, Dr. Gibson and some of the other professors, Dr. Chen, Dr. Carroll, they were very well networked. And they would always get invitations to say, hey, why don't you send some students to these conferences? So, TD Ameritrade down in Orlando, there was another one in San Diego, another one in Nashville, Tennessee, right? So these big corporations would host conferences for advisors. And we, just by being part of the program and their network, were invited to go attend some of those.
Okay.
And while I was down there, I would network, and I would meet people who worked all over, like the Charles Schwabs, the Vanguards, the BlackRocks, like all these different companies around the world, massive, massive corporations, conglomerates. And when it came time to apply, I started, applying to all these different places. Obviously leveraging some of the people I've met, some of the people that have told me, hey, you would be really good at this. Like, hey, why don't you apply for this, or why don't you apply here? And then that ended up landing me at Vanguard here in Charlotte, which is why I stayed in the city after graduation. And it was one of the best decisions. I learned so much there. So much. Just one of the best companies I work for. I would recommend that to anyone, honestly. Vanguard's one of the best companies you could work for and start your career, because they pump a lot of resources into you. Right, so they paid for my Series 7. They paid for my Series 63, which is other types of certifications that you need to be in the industry.
So it just doesn't end with the CFP. You could still go and evolve. How did that help you?
Yeah, so I actually got my 7 and my 63 before I got the CFP, because the CFP, since I had just graduated, I didn't have my 3 years of experience yet, right? So the 7 and 63 allowed me to be in the industry doing specifically what I was doing, to get those years under Vanguard.
Okay.
And, wherever my career took me after that. But it really forces you to kind of stay in that student mindset, right? You're always learning, right? Because after we graduate, it's very easy for people to kind of, okay, I don't need to study anymore, or I don't need to do this, so I'm just going to go work. Where in my specific situation, I was always had another test, had another certification. Even now, I'm still thinking, okay, what else can I do to kind of add a little bit of icing on the cake?
Okay.
You know? So that was a really, really good experience and really good life opportunity, especially when you do it on someone else's bill, you know, especially when they're investing into you. The same way you invest into a stock, the company was investing into me as a person, which, you know, hopefully, you know, my managers would say was a good payoff. So,
man, so it was a pretty long road, and a lot of shifting went on whenever you were in college. But I feel like at the end, then you did highlight your skills that you did have in soccer, and now you're highlighting them in a different industry. So whenever you start getting involved into that financial world, a lot of people don't know how to manage their finances, right? What basic habits did you start adapting to your life to where you're like, okay, I know this skill now. I'm going to start changing this about my tabs that I pay at the beer place, at restaurants. Like, what are basic things that you started learning from other people and from yourself?
So I'll relate it back to something you mentioned when you were introducing me, is coming from a what I would call a Latin household, right? We're not necessarily always taught these things, right? Or it's not really openly spoken about. You know, sometimes, you know, parents are like, don't worry, we'll take care, you know, this is anything money, anything finances, we'll take care of it. Don't worry, you guys are kids, don't worry about that. So from my standpoint, it was very much the same thing, right? So from ground zero, I was always like, well, I never learned about this, you know, when I was 8 years old, or this was never on my radar when I was 12 years old. So I had to play a lot of catch up in that sense, which I think a lot of people coming from where we do find themselves in that situation too, right? They're like, you know, kind of like gate kept for lack of a better term.
Because, I mean, we come to this country with basically, I mean, with nothing. Basically.
With nothing.
With nothing. And then our grandparents didn't know what financial literacy was. And at the end of the day, it ends up affecting us. But, again, that's why we're having this episode, so that we can try to manage that. Because, I mean, now we're the next generation here to where if we decide to, do you think we can change our parents' lives? Do you think we can change our lives?
1000%, man. And I mean, I'll take it a step further. Not just changing their lives, changing the next generations, right? Because what we learn, especially, and what I've learned and what I do, is I try and educate, right? So even though I'm a wealth manager and I do a lot of these things for people, it's very, very important to me that I teach you as well. Right? So I want you to know why I do what I do. Oh, why am I selling this stock? Why am I buying this stock? Why am I doing it when I do it? What does this even mean? Right? Because it's very important for me that you're able to at least explain the concept, or at least elaborate on what it is you're doing and why, or what it is I'm doing for you and why. So that hopefully, you know, when it comes time to tell your kids why this is important, you can at least have a baseline level for why that is what it is, if that makes sense.
Do you think you start teaching because you know that because you didn't have that knowledge, this person should have these tools under their belt?
1000%. I mean, I think I've always had a desire to educate, right? To teach and learn, right? That's just part of how I am wired. But I think growing up the way I did and knowing that was not always accessible, I want to do my part in spreading it where I can and to who I can, right?
And has that impacted your family?
Oh yeah, I think 100% in a positive way, I think.
Okay.
Right, so give you a little background on my parents. My mom's a hairstylist. My dad's an electrical engineer. And my dad didn't learn about these things. And even when I say learn, like I'm talking about just like a basic 401k, or, oh, what is, you know, what's a stock? What's a bond? He didn't learn this type of stuff till he was like 35 or 36, right? Because at the time, going back to what we were talking about, it's just not readily available from our parents, or their parents, better said, from our grandparents' generation. And I think as time went on, I was able to kind of take a step back and say, hey, let's look at your guys' finances with everything I've learned, right? You guys invested in me in a college degree. I sacrificed a lot to go away from home and go study in these places and be away from you guys. Let me pay it back to you. Let me pay it forward to you to show you that, hey, we can probably tweak these things here. Can we save some money here? Can we in the future save some taxes down the line, right? Or even when, if you guys want to leave money to my sister and I, how do we do that in the most tax efficient way, or how do we do that in the best way possible to accomplish what it is you guys want to do?
And
right?
You do that across all your clients, not just with your family, right?
Oh, every client. That's like bare minimum. Every client I do that. I look at their cash flow. I'll look at what their goals are, right? Because that's the one thing about what did I do. No client situation is the same, right? Everyone has a different goal. Everyone has a different family structure. Everyone has a different relationship with their family, right? So they may not be inclined to leave money like my parents would be, or your parents might be, or they might just say, hey, I want to leave it all to the church, right? That looks very different.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone has different goals, which makes what I do so interesting, right? Because every picture looks different.
And just to give some people some context, you did work for a company for a really long time. How long was it?
Yeah, so I worked at Vanguard for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then I guess for us, it would be a really long time. But, you talk to our parents and they're like, man, I've been at the same company for 20 years.
20 years, 30 years, yeah.
But I worked at Vanguard for 4 years, and then I became a partner at a small firm out of Indianapolis.
Okay.
In 2021, because it was a good opportunity during COVID. It granted me the remote work I needed just to take care of certain things with the family. And after that, I've recently pivoted and started up my own company just because I'm like, hey, there were some things I didn't like, and I know I can do this a little better, and I know there's certain values that I can instill in the company and I can instill to other people that I think are going to pay dividends over the long term.
And so therefore you first started transforming a little bit of how your family line started looking at that. Do you find it hard whenever you start teaching for people to start adopting financial habits?
Yeah, 100%. Part of the thing that makes it difficult is by the time I'm talking to you, you have about 25, 26, 35, 37 years of habits that have already been in place, right? So I can sit here and educate you, but habits are habits. So while I educate, part of what I try and do is build new habits or override old habits, right? Because the way you view money by the time, statistically speaking, I think, 70% of the habits you create are solidified by the time you're 25.
Really?
Right? That you carry with you for the rest of your life, both financial and even other habits in general, right? So trying to get people to even realize why this is a bad habit, or why, not necessarily bad, or why this habit may not align with the goals that you have for yourself is always a challenge, because they're like, well, I've done this my whole life. I'm like, yeah, well, that's why we're talking right now, right? That's the exact reason you came to me for help, right?
Yeah.
So.
And they always say that time is the most important thing, right? That's what you're trying to bring up, that let's say you have a client that's 40 years old. To the time that he wants to retire, the time is reduced compared to someone starting at 18.
1,000%. And I mean, even more so, it's just the fact that time is something we never get back, right? Time goes on whether we want it to or not. That's just out of our control. It's the human dilemma, I guess you could call it. People have been trying to solve it for millennia now, and people, you have the Elon Musks of the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world. They're trying to solve it for the future, right? And that's going to be the case forever and ever. That goes by no matter what. Money comes and goes, right? You can always take a risk on a business and make up the money that you lost on it. Or, you can always invest in a stock or invest in something that, sure, it doesn't pan out, but you can always get that money back. Right. One thing you can't do is say, hey, you know what? That idea I had 2 years ago, I should go back in time and do that. It doesn't work like that. Right. Which is why I always tell people the best time to start investing is yesterday. Right. The second best time is today. Right. So that's something, my clients, if they ever watch this, they'll probably laugh and say, you sound like a broken record. But,
No, but I think it's important to highlight that, because let's just say that we do want financial freedom. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want you to speak on this, on like what financial freedom means and how it varies case by case. But let's just say, I feel like as a young person, when I was 20 years old, I didn't think about what I wanted to do. I didn't think about the question of like, oh, when am I going to retire? Never even popped in my head because I'm busy living.
Yeah.
I'm busy partying.
Yeah.
I'm busy spending my money in any way, shape, and form. And I feel like on social media, we make so many jokes on like, oh, I look at my bank account and it's $11.
Yeah.
Or it's like negative 30.
Negative 282. Yeah.
Negative 2. So we have adapted ourselves to that mentality on like, we're always going to be broke. So I think it's essential to highlight that time is the most important thing, and that the most important thing that we can do is just stop wasting time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or not procrastinate, right? Just don't procrastinate, right? Why are you going to do something next week when you can just do it today, right? Or start today, rather than being the person that says, hey, you know what? I'll start on January 1st of 2024. Why don't you start on, what's today's date? July 2023, right? Why are you going to wait?
Would you say that the first step to financial freedom is having a budget?
I think that's a big part of it. I would say that's 80% of how maybe not 80, 70% of how you get there. I think the first step to financial freedom is defining what financial freedom is to you, right? So what financial freedom might mean to you when you want to hit financial freedom may be a very different answer than what it means to me versus what it means for your dad or your brother or someone off the street, right? So I think the first step, and this is something I really, really emphasize with clients, is be goal-based, right? There's a lot of different ways to get to 10.
What does that mean, though?
Yeah. So be goal-oriented. What that means is define what values you have and what is important to you, right? What is financial freedom to you? And I'll give you an example with me personally. To me, financial freedom means I don't have to worry about paying for my quality of life, or don't have to work if I don't want to. That's what financial freedom means to me. In other words, if I want to go bag groceries at Publix for the next 40 years, I am in a financial position to do that without sacrificing without sacrificing the quality of life for my kids or for a wife or a husband or whatever the situation may be, right? It means not compromising the quality of life you desire, but still being able to do whatever you want to do. If you want to go golfing every day, go golf every day. But you're not sacrificing the quality of life that you've established for your family or for whoever matters to you in your life and yourself.
And so having a goal is what I feel like. I'll also illustrate this. It's like a boat gets, once it comes off of the harbor, it gets to where it wants to be because it has an address of where it needs to be. It doesn't end up in an island. Yeah. It doesn't end up wrecked somewhere because it has a direction. So once we start getting a direction of what we want and having goals, how would you explain it to someone normal in the way that they could start just like right off the bat? Yeah.
So I'll use that with a mix of my answer and yours. Okay. Right. So mine, you got to understand what do you value out of life? Is it time? Is it traveling? Is it spending? Kind of like you said, how we're accustomed in our generation to, we're in a consumerism country that you just spend and spend and spend. Yeah. But then it's how do you take those steps? And that's where that 70% of budgeting comes into place, right? Do you know what your quality of life costs, right? Can you quantify that? I'm like, hey, if today my mortgage is this much or my rent is this much and I spend $500 every month going out to eat and I'm at the bar popping bottles and getting Don Julio and 40 and all this different stuff and it's costing me $2,000 a month, is that sustainable over the course of your life? Right, so understanding what your cost of living expenses are is going to be very, very important because then you're like, okay, well, I know this is how much I'm paying right now, or this is how much my lifestyle costs, but I prioritize this and this. This I can probably push off to the side, or this I can probably compromise on and sacrifice a little bit. That's going to give you a good idea for moving into the later stages of your life, how much you're going to be spending. Because like I said, those habits get built within the first 25 years. Do you think people wake up one day at 55 and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be paying the Mercedes car payment anymore. No, those habits are established by then, right? Those everything that you have in place, you're not just going to wake up one day and change. which is why it's a practice and a habit and like a discipline of over the years. You say, you build out the budget. It's like, hey, this is how much I can probably flex in utilities. This is how much I can probably flex in dinner, going out. This is how much I can probably flex in groceries, right? And those habits are what stays consistent over the course of time, right?
And I feel like that's the hardest thing to build. What would you say to someone then that says YOLO?
Yeah.
You only live once.
Yeah, I'll say, well, that your time on this earth, or time living the way that you're living now may be a lot shorter, even though you live once, right? You need to, and like I said, everyone's goals look different, right? And that person that says, hey, you only live once, maybe it's because they come from a lot of wealth, or they're in a situation where they don't need to worry about it, like we were always accustomed to growing up. They may not need to. Money's never been in short demand, money's never been in short supply, so they can say, oh, money's just going to come back. I'm going to spend it and it's going to come back. Why? Because they've never been in a position where they've had to stress that much, or they had to stress that muscle, or they've never been in need, so to speak, right? So I would just say, be conscious and know yourself as much as possible,
to kind of stop doing the habits you do every day. Because it's like, if I go out and eat, I had this thought the other day, and like it comes from what you were saying. It's like, if I buy $15 worth of takeout every single day, that's 15 times 7. Hopefully I don't look dumb right now, but 7, $105 in a week.
Yeah.
And $105 times 4, that's a month. That is, again, 210, 420. Like, it's more than $6,000, right? About in a year. And that's just one single thing to where if you don't fix that little thing, it'll live out 30 years. That's doing the wrong thing. But if we start getting to where, like, okay, you're going to save $10 a day every day for the next 50 years, then you start switching that mindset, like, hey, instead of getting takeout, save that money, or put this money somewhere. How do you start managing that? Like, what does a Roth IRA do to you? Because I think that's one of the key elements that I've learned, that I'm like, wow, I should have started this when I was 16.
Yeah. And it goes back to time is the biggest factor, right? Time is something you never get back. The earlier you start, the more you have time to earn interest. The more your interest has time to earn interest, and so on and so forth. It's that cycle, right? That's why they say start early.
And bad habits earn interest too.
They do, in the opposite way. And that's something, you bring up a really good point by saying that, because we all talk about inflation, right? Everyone, that's been a hot topic, with Trump in office, Biden in office, whoever. So it's been the argument since the end of time, how the price of things are going up. Well, let me introduce you to a new concept called lifestyle inflation, right? So, we start off making, let's just say, for the sake of round numbers, like $20,000 a year. Let's say when you're first out of college, or part-time job. What happens when you get that promotion? You go to 40,000, right? Do you think you're going to still spend money the same way that you were at 20,000? No. Then what happens when you get the next promotion? You make 100,000. Do you think you're going to still live like someone making 20,000? No. You're not going to be living like someone making 40,000 either, right? Your lifestyle is going to expand also. Or you're going to get that nicer car. You're going to get that nicer pad. You're going to get the nicer setup, or the nicer shoes, the Louis, the Gucci, everything, right? That's anyone, right? You're going to want to treat your girl a little bit more, right? Whereas a lot of people, I try and stress, I'm like, the more you earn, the more normal people spend, right? It's that consumerism mindset. So if you can keep that in check for as long as possible, right? What if you get a $3,000 promotion, and instead of spending an extra $3,000, you invested that extra $3,000, right? So taking that mind shift set is going to go dividends over the course of your life if you can really anchor in and be disciplined like that, right? Which is hard for a lot of people.
That lifestyle inflation concept really it makes you start thinking, like, let's just say someone were to get up to that 100,000, but they lived like if they earned only 20. That's 80 grand right there.
Yeah, that's 80 grand. You can invest. That's 80 grand. And that's a really key differentiation to make, right? Like you want to enjoy life as well, which is there's a fine line, and that's the hardest part, right? It's like dieting, right? Do you know what the best diet is?
That's a little bit of a deep message for me, I would say, because whenever you diet, I used to tell myself, oh, I gotta be strict. I can only do this. I can only do this. I can only restrict yourself. But the mind shift started changing whenever I said lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Because I want something sustainable. I don't want to deprive myself. Yeah. And I mean, you can explain it better, but then whenever I shifted my mindset on that concept of how I wanted to consume food, it wasn't a diet. It was a lifestyle choice. Bingo. Then I started progressing. It was something that I enjoyed, something that I could live with.
1,000%. And I mean, when you look at it, when you think about it in that sense, right? I tell people dieting and your finances have a lot of, and your financial habits at least have a lot of correlation. Right? The best diet for someone is the one that they can stick to, right? You hear about all these things like, oh yeah, you should do like the keto diet, but then people only do it for 2 months and they're back to eating like shit the rest of their life. Or they're like, oh, you should try like vegan stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's sustainable for maybe like a month until you check your bank account and then it's too expensive to sustain, right? So knowing yourself and knowing what you can stick to is the best type of diet, right? The best type of budget, the best type of financial plan you could possibly do for yourself. Right? Because if you're only going to do it for a month, then what's the point of even doing it in the first place?
And we're emphasizing budget and this whole idea of mindset change because you can't get to 401ks. And we'll start talking about them right now. And Roth IRAs, we can't get to an investment portfolio unless we get down to the root of the issue.
Exactly. And that's where the behavioral side of it comes into play, right? Something that I would really, I work with a lot of different types of people. I work with a lot of different types of businesses, and a lot of people of different social status as well, right? So I have some pretty high net worth clients. I have some clients that are everyday people like you and me, right? Because we're nothing special.
Yeah, exactly.
We're still making our way in the world, right? But
hustlers,
exactly. Yeah, we're still on the grind a little bit. So, one of the things that the message, the way I go about the message is going to differ with all of them, but the underlying message is the same. Understand yourself first, understand the habits first, and understand, why you look at money the way you do, right? That's the behavioral side of it, right? Because numbers don't lie. Numbers are numbers. 1 + 1 is 2, yes or yes, right? But how you get that one and how you get the other one and why you get those to match up the way they do is going to differ from person to person. Right? The way we look at money, the way we appreciate money or appreciate work ethic is going to look different than someone who, has never been in short supply of it, right? Or has never had to kind of work their way up, for lack of a better term, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like if you're blessed enough to be in a position like that where you can take a little bit of the stress off yourself, like sure, be happy about it. But
in a real world setting, most of America is suffering. Most of the world has no food. So it's like, come on, be realistic,
You gotta pick and choose a little bit. Like kind of gotta pick and choose your appreciation.
Because then I have this issue that on social media it changed up everything. It's like lifestyle. Like you kind of want a Ferrari now, but and then you get sad that you don't have a Ferrari. Yeah. So it's like just deciding what you want. Okay, let's just say that I look up, because social media also is a vast. It's a lot of information and we don't understand it. And so one of the things I always look at and someone always advertises is traditional IRAs and then Roth IRAs. Yeah. So what is that?
Yeah.
And why is it better to start it sooner than later? Would you say that's like one basic thing that we could start off doing once we get our budget down?
100%. And I think not only just start off with it, why it's so important to start early. So let's start off with what an IRA is. Roth or traditional, doesn't matter. IRA stands for individual retirement account. That's what the term IRA stands for. So that means you as Mario, me as Sal, we would each open up an individual, because we're individuals, retirement account. The traditional portion and the Roth portion of that term, those terms, it just determines what type of tax benefit you receive. right? So let's expand on that concept a little bit. Traditional IRA is I put money into an account and I reduce my taxes that I pay in the current year by however much I put in there. So when I'm older and, under current law, it's 72, 73, 74, 75 years old, depending on your birth year. When I pull that money out to live off of, I pay the taxes then. That's traditional, right? Benefit now, pay tax later.
Okay.
The flip side of that is the Roth, right? Roth is I tell the government, you know what, I'll pay the taxes in the current year, right? But because I paid the tax in the current year, when I'm retired, specifically after the age of 59 and a half under current tax law, when I pull that money out, I don't owe you anything, Uncle Sam. I don't owe you one dime because I already did my part. I paid the tax when I was younger. It all grows tax-free, right? And why that's important is going to differ for person to person, right? Like the way I look at us is we're making the least amount of money we'll probably ever make in our life, right? Right now, today, knock on wood, hopefully. So that means we're going to be in the lowest tax bracket currently that we'll ever be in our life. Doesn't it logically make sense for us to lock in that tax bracket today so that when you are in a higher tax bracket in the future, you don't owe the government anything? Doesn't that make sense?
Because the idea is that it's going to only keep on going up. Historically, we've seen that it's just kept on rising. So that's why it's beneficial to do it now instead of later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, like I said, that's going to vary from person to person, right? If you're in sales, sometimes salespeople, when they're young and they're hungry and they have that desire, they're going to be grinding like all hell to make those quotas, to make those sales targets so that they are in a higher tax bracket today than when they might take their foot off the gas in the future. Right? So it's going to differ. It just depends on, hey, do you think I'm going to make more money today or do I think I'm going to make more money tomorrow? Tomorrow as in later on in life. Yeah. Right? So that's going to determine a lot of how you approach this.
And can you give me numbers of why it can only be, I've heard this, that it can only be a max out of $6,000. Why?
So...
Or explain to me how that grows, that those $6,000 grow.
Yeah, so... Let's before I answer that, let's talk about why those numbers are important and why time and getting started early is important.
Okay.
So because you're getting some kind of tax benefit, the government is going to tap you out and say, hey, you know what, you're taking advantage of this too much. We're going to top everyone off at $6,500 in 2023 if you're under the age of 50. And then if you're over the age of 50, you get a $1,000 boost. So over the age of 50 becomes $7,500 under current law. If you're our age, under the age of 50, that's $6,500. You can do that every year. Once the opportunity for the year passes, you can't go, and it goes back to my whole theory, I can't go back in time and say, oh, now I have the $6,500. Now I want to invest for 2021. That doesn't work like that, right? Which is why it's important to start today and start chipping away at that $6,500 clock little by little, right? When the year passes, specifically April 15th, that's not, that's going to change depending on the person. But loosely, once the year goes by, you lose the opportunity. So that's a whole $6,500 that could have been earning interest, that could have been earning dividends, that could have been working in your favor that you just lost the opportunity on. Right? So when you're collecting quarterly dividends, when Apple pays a dividend, when Microsoft pays a dividend, when there are, this is a little bit in the weeds, but something called stock splits or reverse stock splits, if you don't invest little by little, you're not going to be a part of that. Right? So start today, start as soon as possible. $1 is more than zero. $5 is more than one. $10 is more than five. So even if it's a little bit, it's better than you would have been had you done nothing. Right?
And before you get to that point of investing, do you have to have an emergency fund just in case? Because that $6,500, you're not going to be able to pull it out, right?
Yeah, you're right. So there are certain rules with IRAs that, like a first-time home purchase, things like that. There are certain caveats, but for the most part, I tell people, whatever you put into an IRA, expect not to have access to that or not to touch it as much as possible until you're about 59 and a half. right? Because you get penalized if you, which is a hard concept. You want to talk about talking to clients and talking to people and educating them. That's a hard concept for someone like myself to explain to someone, because it's like, that's a long time from now, right? What if I don't make it that long? Which is always a possibility. What if you die before that? But what's a scarier possibility? Getting there and not having it, or, not needing it, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
That's a good way to explain
right?
it. Yeah.
What's a scarier thought? Oh man, if, God forbid something happens to me and I get hit by cars, well, I'm not going to need the money anyways, right? I'm in the grave, I'm 6 feet under.
Yeah.
Or not doing everything that I'm doing now and getting to that point and not having it. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
That's a scary, scary thought. And when you put it to like that, when you put in those terms to people, to clients, to friends, they're like, well, I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah.
And then it's easier to get them on board, kind of, right?
Yeah.
But, going back to your question about the emergency fund, a lot of that ties into the budget, right? How much do you need to live? How much do you need for your monthly, expenditures? That's going to determine, along with your risk tolerance, right? Am I someone who, has a good stomach for risk, which most entrepreneurs and most business people, that you have to have a certain stomach for risk for that, right? To know that one year the business can do great, the next year it might not, next year, who knows, right? Most people, they tend to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to that.
Okay.
Yep, they tend to be more like, no, I want to see the money in my bank account. If I can see it, I have access to it, I know what it's doing. I always tell people, when it comes to an emergency fund, you want to maintain about, rule of thumb is typically 3 to 6 months. I tend to tell people, be a little bit more conservative than that, especially in this political environment, especially in this market and environment that we're in right now, even socially. 6 to 9 months is typically what I try and advise people to keep in as an emergency fund, right? Because, what if, God forbid, you got laid off? What if, God forbid, you have to pull a large lump sum that might eat up 2 months of expenses? Well, if you're at 6 to 9 right there, you maintain a good little nest egg.
And on average, what would you say, like, just so that people know, like, what 6 months of savings look like, that are your emergency fund? So
let's say, round numbers, just to make it easy to understand, I spend $3,000 a month.
Yep.
Right? $3,000 of month is what I need to take care of the mortgage, to take care of the student loans, to take care of a kid, to take care of, home care, whatever the case is. In that situation, I would need about $18,000. Yep. Anywhere between $18,000 and $27,000 to have that 6 month to 9 month protection.
Just in case anything happens, because when you start investing, you're not going to be able to pull that money out, or it's a sane idea to not think about that money, right?
Exactly. I would think about it as tomorrow money, right? Tomorrow comes and then I'm like, okay, I'll touch it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and, I'll touch it tomorrow, right? Okay. You just keep pushing it off. There are certain types of accounts that you can open to have a little bit more access to them. But when it comes to retirement, especially with like those IRAs, going back to your original question, that's exactly how it sounds, individual retirement account, right? So that's something that I always tell people. I'm like, when you put that money away, think about it as gone. Then you protect yourself with that emergency fund, right? Because, do you know what one of the biggest reasons someone would even need an emergency fund is for?
No idea.
Job loss. Layoffs, right? Getting cut, getting fired, right? That's something that no one plans for, right? That's something that you never go into work saying, you know what, tomorrow I'm probably going to get fired. That's just not a thought most people have, right? But you want to be prepared for that, God forbid, right? You want to be prepared for that in case something happens to the business. What if your business gets acquired by someone else, right? The business is going to do what's best for the business. Unfortunately, certain people have to be collateral, but that's just the way it is. That's the nature of the beast.
And that's an interesting concept. So let's say that we do have our emergency fund. We don't have to suffer that much.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's protection. It's the what if, I always call it, I'm saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? That's what the emergency fund is for.
And that's why, again, it's so important to know what type of lifestyle you want to live, because I think whenever the sun is shining, oh yeah, it's great. Mm-hmm. But whenever moments are grim and you don't know where you're headed, mm-hmm. that's where you really start needing financial literacy for everything.
1,000%. And I mean, you, not just that, and you really learn about yourself. Like when, something that I laugh about, is when life is good, I'm always thinking, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. It's probably God's going to give me a little bit of a check and say, okay, let's see what you're made of. And then when things are bad, I'm always thinking to myself, okay, there's going to be an opportunity that pops up here sometime soon that I'm going to break out of this, right? So, and a lot of people have that opposite mindset, that when life is great, they're like, yeah, I'm on top of the world. Nothing's ever going to change. And then when something does change, they come crashing down, right? Or when they're at the bottom, they're like, you know what? I'm never going to make it out of here. My life is on a downward trajectory for the rest of it. I'm never going to make it out of here, right? Where I always encourage people to think, hey, when things are good, be grateful, but always prepare the what ifs, right? When things are bad, keep working hard. There's going to be an opportunity at the end of the tunnel, right? But are you going to be ready to meet that opportunity? That's where the question comes in, right?
Wow. And let's say I do have my, okay, and we've been traveling on the journey of wealth building, right?
Yeah.
So why would people then buy life insurance? Why would people buy disability insurance? Why are those things so hand in hand with building wealth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people that do what I do have different perspectives on this, right? So that's one thing I'll make very clear. You might talk to me who life insurance has a place in your portfolio, but only after you check off certain things.
Okay.
Right? Only after you do. Some of the first questions I ask is, do you have an emergency fund set up? Great. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next thing. Are you investing in some type of IRA? Great. All right. Are you, do you have a 401k at work? Oh, you do? Great. Does your company put any money? Do they do a match, a 4% match, 3% match? Are you taking advantage of that? Oh, no? Okay, great. Let's do that first. Then let's look at life insurance. Or, hey, are you investing in any type of, stock option plan at work? The answer is no. Oh, okay, well, let's look into that first. Then let's look at life insurance, right? So there's a checklist that I would look at first before tapping into life insurance, right? Part of that is because life insurance is great for protection, but also something you can take loans against down the line, right? Depending on what type of policy you have, you can build a cash value in there that you can then loan or take a loan out of down the line.
But you'd have to have certain things in place before. And like you said, it's it varies on financial planners. So what you're saying has proven to yourself effective. So therefore, that's why you're going to continue doing it, and for your clients too, right?
Exactly, right. And historically, one thing that a lot of people don't really understand is, and I might get a lot of heat for this, which is fine, whatever. But the people that love life insurance are the people who sell life insurance, right? Who loves life insurance? People that sell life insurance. And, that as they should, right? You want to promote the product. You want to push the product that you're using it, especially if in certain circumstances, it can really help people a lot, right? Or what if, God forbid, I were to pass away? I want to make sure that if I have a family or if I have kids, you want to make sure that they're taken care of. Now, granted, can an IRA or a Roth IRA or certain 401ks or other products accomplish the same thing? Sure. Right? But life insurance is another, like I said, product to do that, right? Another way to accomplish the same goal, right? 1 + 1 = 2, but the way people get one and the other way people get one differ. So we have to check off, or for you, it's a certain checklist. So then whenever life insurance or that question comes in, what is effectively being done in those moments? I mean, you've got everything else in place, and let's say just like insurance, why is it there? Well, I mean, it's there for protection to a certain extent. Okay. It's there for potential loan value down the line. Kind of like I said, over the years, the way life insurance works, and this is for, some of your viewers that may not they hear life insurance, going back to the whole social media thing. You hear these buzzwords like,
yes,
oh, life insurance, IRA or Roth IRA, retirement, this, that, whatever. But there's no real explanation sometimes for
how to start, what it is,
who do you talk to, how much does it cost, why would I do this, why would I not do this, right? Because sometimes those two pieces of information are just as valuable. The reason you would do something may not be as important as to why you might not want to do it, right? So that's always a clear distinction. A lot of times, especially with social media, we hear why to do something, not always the why not. So going back to your thing, the way life insurance works is you pay a monthly premium, right? To say, hey, I'll put this much in every single month religiously into a policy. And then when I die, right, I'm going to have a beneficiary on that policy or beneficiaries on that policy for whatever an amount is. Sometimes it's 500,000, sometimes it's $1 million, depending on your net worth, right? Typically you want it to cover your net worth or any liabilities you might have when you die. When you do that, it's going to build, hopefully you have a certain policy in place that is building that cash value, right? Okay. So that, going back to what you said, sometimes you want to access it. If you do not, then that's something you might want to look into, right? Something you might say, okay, how can I get a cash value in that policy, right? Or sometimes people might need coverage for a certain amount of time, right? So maybe rather than a whole life policy or a universal life policy, they get a term policy. They'll say, hey, we'll protect you for X amount of years. If you outlive that, you get nothing. But if you die within those 10 years, we're going to dish out some money to your beneficiaries or to your family, whatever the case may be, right? So different types of life insurance or term policies are going to have different purposes, which is, from what I do, those are the holistic things that I'm looking at, right? I'm saying like, okay, well, if you have a house worth $500,000, you have a mortgage left on it of $300,000, and God forbid something were to happen to you, someone's going to be on the hook for that mortgage. So that's one way of looking at policies like that. Insurance, kind of like it says, life insurance. You're insuring your life.
Just like car insurance, like it's like you don't know if an accident's going to happen tomorrow, but just in case, so you don't have to be the victim of paying $30,000 for your car damages.
Exactly. And it goes back to those what ifs. What if this? What if that? Right? This is a good way of all thinking about that. Once again, just different ways to cut the pie.
Okay. And one thing we didn't mention, 401ks, I've never really gotten to why that is or why they were even created, how it even works. What is it, a 401k? So
a 401k is essentially a account that the company will open in your benefit.
Okay.
Right? So let's say I work for La Casa Grande podcast. You might say, hey, we're going to offer everyone that works at La Casa Grande podcast a 401k. You can put money into it. Once again, the government puts certain limitations on how much you can put in there. But let's say, as my employer, you say, hey, if you put 4% of your salary or 4% of your pay into your 401k, I, as your employer, will put another 4%, right? So you have a way of adding value towards my retirement if I'm taking those steps for myself, right? Now, something you might want to do as an employer, might want to consider are, hey, over the years, because I'm putting money into this for you, it may not always, you have access to bits and pieces of it over the years. And then once you work for me for 5 years, you have access to all the money that I've put into you. You always have access to your own money, but you may not have access to the money that the employer puts in for you. And that might be an incentive as an employer to say, hey, let's put this in place so that so that they work for a while, so that they come and want to work for La Casa Grande for a while.
Because you can have that on retainer if they don't complete on a certain number of years, right?
Yeah, or if they're thinking of leaving, if I were thinking of leaving you, I'd say, I'm on year 3. If I leave now, I'm leaving $25,000 over the years on the table. It's going to make me think twice, right? I might say, maybe I'll stay another 2 years just so I can access all that money, right? And these are all different ways that, a 401k have a place in a portfolio, even as a business owner, right? Because we're in the same position. You own a business, I own a business. That's something that, you may want to have in place as a consideration, right? As a benefit to the employee to say, hey, you take care of yourself. I'm going to do my part to also take care of you in your benefit.
And that goes varying on every company, right?
It does. Yeah. Every company has different, what I would call vesting schedules. So sometimes it's year 1, you have 20%, year 2, you have 40%, year 3, you have 60% of what I put in there for you. Other companies have something called a cliff, right? So it can be, hey, year 1 is 0, year 2 is 0, year 3 is 0. But once you complete your 3rd year, you have access to all the money, right? So depending on the line of business and what the turnover looks like, it's going to look different.
So you help out business owners like that?
I do, yeah. So that's something I actually, obviously being a business owner myself, and having a lot of business owner friends, we have a lot of mutual friends that own businesses as well. I specialize in that, right? So I actually, it's probably one of my favorite things to do, right? Just because you see them grow something and you see them provide jobs for people and you see them doing something good for their employees, that if they take advantage of it and if they use it to its fullest capacity, is going to be something that might put their kids through college, that might allow them to go retire in Florida if they want to, right? It's something that pays, once again, dividends over the course of a life.
And for a business owner aspect, that is also beneficial for a business owner because those are write-offs, right?
Write-offs, tax incentives, and it'll save in the fact that, going back to what I was saying, people will stay with you longer, which means you save money in hiring, you save money in training, right? Having to retrain someone, right? The longer you keep someone on, that's more experience that they're getting for themselves that they can then pass along to other employees or new hires, right? So it's not just a tax benefit or a later benefit. It's also a actual practical business benefit to you now.
And then an investment in the person, because the person is then again more motivated to work for you.
100%. Especially if they know my employer cares about me. My employer has my best interest at heart, has my family's best interest at heart, they'll run through a wall for you, right?
And then that's where the concept of like, okay, now everybody wants to be a business owner. We're being sold with so much propaganda, like, hey, you leave your job and you could become a business owner. I feel like it's not for everybody, or that's not really a realistic idea, because again, wealth or financial freedom is based on what you want. You can't allow people to tell you what you want. Not everybody's going to be successful in their journey to trying to be a business owner. Out of 100, one might be a business owner. So I feel like, don't you think that changing that perspective is as important in today's society?
I think you couldn't have said it better. Honestly, it goes back to, and I've said this time and time again, and I will continue to say it until I hit the hay. Know yourself, right? Our parents come from a generation of people who loyalty to an employer was so important, right? They would be at the same business or the same employer for 30, 25, 35 years, right? Where a lot of our generation is, hey, if you see someone not treating you well, if you see someone not in your best interest, go find another employer or go start your own business, kind of like you said, like you're seeing a lot of that on social media. But what they soon come to find out is what it takes to start a business, what it takes to not just grow a business, but the hardest part is maintaining, right? The growth, when you're excited about and you're seeing these metrics being hit, bump, 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 bump. What happens when you hit your first quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters of plateau? That's where you start to see, who's really cut out for the business? Who's really cut out to say, hey, it's not always going to be growth. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be tough conversations. There's going to have to be made, tough decisions. That is all going to come into play, especially when you're a business. And that's why, like I said, social media is good for a lot of things. That propaganda, like we were mentioning, you see who's made for it and who's not. And not everyone is made for it, right? Otherwise, none of us would ever have employees.
And I'm not unmotivating anyone, just so that it's out there. Like if you want to go start your business and want to do that, go ahead. I feel that risk takers are also the ones that are going to get the cake. But what I'm trying to say is that there is not only one way towards financial freedom, which is the whole concept of this episode. Where, like you were saying, if what it takes you going from McDonald's, let's say you're making $15 an hour and there's not a 401k there, but you know that at this institution, if you get this certification, you're going to get a 401k. It's like, that's also another form of financial freedom.
100%. And I mean, it depends on, you know, and this isn't to talk down on any type of profession one way or the other, you know, like whether you work at McDonald's. I mean, I've had clients who work minimum wage for 10 years. I've had clients that, you know, and they're in a better position than the client that makes the 6 figures, but they spend 6 figures.
Okay, so
know?
see that
Exactly.
that's where that concept comes in, to where like, hey, this guy could be making $40,000 and he has a good portfolio, and you're making $200,000, and then you end up with nothing. It's like, yo.
It's that lifestyle inflation. It's that prioritizing what matters to you, right? And this is, you want to talk about one of the biggest things to financial freedom. What good is earning $100,000 if you spend $101,000, right? It doesn't do you very good, right? What's good? And you can toss any number in there. What's good of being a millionaire every year, right? Making $1 million every year if you spend $1,005,000, right? Doesn't do you very good, right? So these are all different things that I really try and emphasize with people, is try and prioritize the right way, right? Depending on your goals, right? Maybe the goal is, hey, one of my big metrics for success in life is I want to own the Ferrari when I'm 55. And that's okay too. But at least you know that ahead of time, so you can at least strive towards that down the line.
And it's just about staying consistent. Like, hey, okay, if that's your goal, stay consistent. Like, don't do anything else. And Sal, I don't mean to cut you off short, but this episode I feel is like really heavy. I feel like anyone listening to it, listen to it carefully, rewatch it. There's so much information that we talked about. I'd like to get one life advice that you've learned other than wealth. Like, let's get out of the concept of money. Like, for you, one thing that was the most valuable thing you learned.
Oh, man, that's heavy. I think, and this is the approach I take with everything in life, there are so many different ways to be successful, whatever that means to you, right? Just because someone's going about it a certain way does not mean they're wrong. Just like if I go about it a certain way, it does not make me wrong, or it doesn't make me right. So understanding that whatever it is you want out of life, and whatever it is you want out of, you know, whether finances, marriage, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You can achieve that your own way. You can achieve that doing it the way you want to, but don't ever discredit other people's ways. Don't ever discredit, you know, the way someone else may approach it or value that, right? And that's the biggest thing I can take away from anything I've learned in my life, right? I've seen pros, I've seen, you know, going back to soccer, I've seen professionals, you know, play D3 soccer, and now they're, you know, players in Europe, right? I've seen players that you would think from a kid they were the all-star the whole time, and now they dropped out of the game at a very young age, right? Because they couldn't take it. So many different ways to approach anything in life, and that's something that I encourage everyone to, you know, kind of take with you.
Sal, very knowledgeable words. Thank you for taking the time here to also share a little bit of the financial freedom and how we can achieve it. The idea, that whole concept, I think we broke down a little bit of how social media is driving us towards, leading us to kind of what they want us to think.
Yeah.
And I feel like at the end of the day, it's like, you said it best. It's like success is measured in person by person. Yeah. It's not one thing. It's where like success means a Ferrari. Yeah. Success could mean a family. Success could mean you having $1,000 in your savings account. Yeah. Like it doesn't really matter. So again, at the end of the day, guys, I feel like take this episode as if maybe it could start setting you on a different path from who you are tomorrow. If you guys stayed this long, really, I appreciate you guys. And Sal, I appreciate you too. And again, I think we're going to have another episode because it's just so much. I can go on for hours, we could go on for real estate. We can go on for businesses. And it was just so exciting, and really I learned a lot too from like this episode. I'm like, okay, Roth IRA and like traditional tax.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time. And guys, if you guys stayed this long, please like, comment, subscribe. I'll have Sal's links down at the bottom because
Perfect.
you are a business owner and you can help out individuals. Is it a special type of person that you're looking for? What is it?
Listen, I work with business owners. I work with businesses themselves. I work with, everyday people like you and I, individuals and their families, right? So I don't, if I can help, I'm going to help is kind of my mentality.
What's the best way to reach you?
So you can reach me on Instagram.
Okay.
That's a really good way, especially, with the audience the way it is now, probably watching this online.
Yeah.
_ Sal Perez. And like I said, you'll probably put everything there. But thanks
Yes,
so much
sir.
for having me. I had a blast. I love what you're doing here. Honestly, you're building something special, and I'm just happy to be a part of it while you're still in the early stages, man.
Don't worry. Like my mentor always tells me, don't forget the little guys. I was like,
Yeah,
how?
exactly.
I was like, how can I? I am a little guy. I was like, come on. Hey guys, thank you guys for staying this long. Like, comment, subscribe, and if you guys want to reach Sal or me, I'll have all our tags at the bottom, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.
Cheers.